All right. I just want to welcome everyone to being with Dr. Z. This is our Women's History Month edition. We have some amazing leaders that are both in Georgia, Illinois, and everywhere sometimes that are doing some amazing work to address disparities with women through various systems and the intersectionality oftentimes of the oppressive systems that we're dealing with. So I want to welcome Waleisah as well as Avalon and just give each of them just a moment to introduce themselves, share a little bit about the work that they're doing, and anything else they would like to say in this introduction. So I will start with Waleisah, and then if Avalon would like to go next.
Hi, I'm Waleisah here in Atlanta, Georgia. I am the wearer of many hats, but mostly known for being the founder of New Life Second Chance Outreach Incorporated, which is sort of like a reentry navigation resource hub for individuals who are justice impacted. And my current work with my campaign here was starting the Georgia chapter of All of Us or None, working on ending slavery. So I'll say the last one because I also sit as the board chair of Restore Georgia, which is a Georgia nonprofit that works to advocate for individuals who are impacted by sex offense laws and the sex offender registry. So I'll leave it at that. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And Avalon.
And I'm a Sigma Gamma Rho, so I'll make sure I put that in there as well.
Thank you. Awesome. Avalon.
So I'm Avalon Betts-Gaston. I direct and lead the Illinois Alliance for Reentry and Justice. We are a statewide coalition coalition/ecosystem of currently incarcerated people, directly impacted people, service providers, all throughout the state of Illinois, united in reimagining and remaking justice. And we do it in three main areas: redefining reentry, transforming policies, and mobilizing the public. So we are bringing the voices of our incarcerated siblings into the space to make sure that we're centering the voices of the people who are the experts in how we can reimagine and remake justice. And I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta.
Awesome. Thank you both for your introductions. And part of our conversation, we are going to be talking about, I think all of us are affiliated with different organizations. And one of the things that we realize is that within this criminal legal system, Black women oftentimes have higher sentences, restitution, and it's important that advocacy is across the board, right? So not just with those people who have been directly impacted by the systems, but that our national organizations and leaders are taking a stance as well. So when you all think about just what drives your work, we'll start out there. What really got you into the work that you are currently doing, and what keeps you going in that space?
I'll start with me. I think what got me started was I kind of did a little advocacy when I got incarcerated. Prior to going, I guess you could call it ignorance or lack of empathy, lack of compassion. I just didn't have any compassion for folks who went to jail. I figured you did the crime, you should do the time. I was uneducated on a lot of things. My mom was in active substance use probably half of my life. So probably about 20 years she was addicted to crack. So constant in and out of prison. So everything that was about prison was a letdown for me, even in my communities and stuff. So, but when I got in, I saw a completely different perspective of women coming back. And the guards would say, "Welcome back, Johnson," and it's like a second home. And then when you ask somebody why they're there, it's because I couldn't pay my probation fine or fee. And I didn't think that's what people went to jail for. Prior to me going in, I thought you hurt people, you commit crimes. But when you see women sitting in prison who literally wasted taxpayer dollars, well, not them, but the folks that the system caused them to waste taxpayer dollars to sentence them, And to know that they're sitting there because somebody stole diapers or a pack of chicken. And I'm thinking, well, hell, that's somebody steals something. Yeah, they should be held accountable, but you don't put them in jail for that. You maybe give them a little community service, but you also tell them where they can go get some diapers and some chicken from. You don't lock them up. So it gave me a completely different perspective. So while I was in there, I was able to advocate with a lot of things that were going on, like a lot of ADA violations where people who were disabled couldn't get what they need, people who actually depended on breathing machines or diabetic medications. And so that's kind of sort of where my advocacy started, because I saw a completely different picture of it. And so when I got out, the challenges that I had, despite having a master's degree or getting a job, it was like, so all of this 15, 20 years of work, what I've done, and all this professional work I've done, y'all don't care about any of that. Just this one felony is what is supposed to, but I got kids, so y'all don't have no problem with all of us being homeless. Y'all don't have a problem with any of this. But wait a minute, this is the same. We're in the Bible Belt. We're in this whole faith. Everything is about love thy neighbor, forgive your neighbor, and everything is about children. We want to protect our kids. We love our kids. But when you locking up mamas and daddies, or you're hindering them when they get out, that affects the same kids that you claim you love. So it just was confusing to me. So right then and there, I think most of it was just because I was pissed off. Some things needed to change, and I know I couldn't change it by myself, but I wanted to be a part of what was changing it. So I've been doing it ever since I got out in 2011.
Thank you for sharing that.
So I have always been an advocate. I was the one that, tried to look out for the people who, even in school, like I started my advocacy work. Like my first public action was when I was 15, and I was a U.S. congressional page, and I was protesting against apartheid in South Africa. And I organized the other congressional pages, including the then Speaker of the House's grandson, to go and protest the South African embassy. So I've always had a desire to help people and call out injustice and things like that. I went to law school, but I didn't go to law school to right wrongs. I went to law school to make money. I'm just gonna say what it is. And then I was wrongfully convicted in 2015. And so going through that experience, I had really been indoctrinated by society and the system to think, like you, Waleisah, like even if you didn't do what they got you for, you did something, otherwise they wouldn't come after you. You're not in there serving time in prison for no reason, or I just felt like people in prison and in jails were bad people. And I found myself on a bunk in the mountains of West Virginia, having basically a breakdown, a nervous breakdown and a mental breakdown. And I had women in that prison love me. Like they didn't even know my name, and they just took care of me. And I realized, like, why? What are we doing? Why are we teaching people to be afraid of people who are inside? Like these women made sure I had the necessities, because I got there just before a holiday weekend, and I had money, but I wasn't able to go to commissary and buy anything because of the holiday and because of the weekend. So I had people literally like just come and drop stuff off to me, because I was a hot mess. I'm not even gonna lie. Like I was in the pits of despair, and those women loved me back to life, and I owe them my life, because if they had not been there for me, I just don't even know what the outcome would have been. So that made me two things: embarrassed, but also determined. I became embarrassed because of what I had believed about women who were in prison. And then I became, angry and determined to not allow people to be indoctrinated like I was indoctrinated. So I vowed to myself that when I get out of this place, I'm going to make sure that I paint a proper picture of people who are in prison, and not this CSI, LA Law, all this BS that they selling through the court systems and on TVs. Like I just was vowed to do that because they had been dehumanized in my psyche, and now that veil had been lifted, and I just vowed to never go back there. And so when I came home in the midst of the pandemic, I just started volunteering. Like I did not have a job. I did not know how I was going to get a job. I have a law degree, but I can't practice law. I don't even know if I want to practice law, to be quite honest, because the legal profession was not made for people of color, and especially not women of color. So we have to sacrifice so much of ourselves to be successful in that space, right? And so I just started volunteering, and I trusted that God would open up a door for wherever I needed to be. And that ultimately led me to the Illinois Alliance, where I began to lead that coalition, and I've been doing that for the past 2 years.
I appreciate that. And I just want to lift up, like, you know, as you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that there's so many like stigmas, right, attached to, you know, having a record or being incarcerated. And oftentimes people feel like we are a liability, right? Like having a conviction means that we're a liability. And I struggle with that, right? Because as you mentioned, like, you mentioned it in the sense of, you know, they may have not been, you know, been charged with what they did, but they did something, right? But I think everybody's done something, right? Like ultimately, you know, everybody's done something that could potentially land them in jail or prison. You know, it could be something minor, it could be something major, right? And I think that you have a lot of people that are in our system that were charged with conspiracy and, you know, things by association. And I think that unfortunately within our community, like you both said, people have been ingrained, because I was a therapist, right? I was a social worker, and it's like the same thing. I thought the system was doing the right thing, and that people, like, you know, oh, they did something, and so that's the result. And so, you know, I think that it's so important to take time to like educate people when they're open to being educated, because I think there are a lot of people that feel like they know, and like, okay, you've done this, so that must mean that you're this type of person, or you're labeled now, you know, the various labels, right, that people have to live with. So when you all think about when people make those kind of comments, or just the idea of like perpetual punishment, right, like that we are supposed to be punished until the end of days because of a situation, like, what are your thoughts or reflections on that? Either one of you, if you all want to just chime in.
What are the thoughts about folks giving us a scarlet letter basically and not letting us? Okay. I think that's awful. And again, as a person of faith, I always go back to that, because I think even in my advocacy, everything I do is rooted in my faith. And according to my Bible, you know, we're supposed to love our neighbors as not only does Jesus love us, but as we love ourselves. We're supposed to practice mercy and forgiveness. And we're in the Bible Belt. This is the place that will use religion to censor a woman's body, but completely throws religion out of the book when it comes time to using common sense when we're dealing with forgiveness. And so I think that's awful. I think with anything, nobody wants to be reminded that the fact that they had a baby at 11, you know, and it's weird because people have babies all the time at 11, 12, 13, but they don't go 30, 40 years with that same stigma of having that held over their shoulders. You know, you have some men who gotten in a relationship or abused a woman, and now, you know, they have changed or progressed. That's not held over their heads all the time, you know, but folks who's gone to prison, we've done our time, and it's no amount of what we have to do we get out and we do community service. We help feed the homeless. We do what we can to advocate for other people. We get jobs. We start businesses. We go to law school. And it's like, dang, what can we do for you to accept us for the great assets to the community that we are? What all do we have to do? And so labeling us and continuing to keep us down is just not, it's not good. And it explains a lot why, particularly here in Georgia, why our crime rates are high, why our homelessness rates are so high. Because I don't know why people ain't putting it together, but ding, 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 when people can't get jobs, they can't get housing, and people can't get jobs and housing, they're going to do what they need to do to feed themselves and their kids. It's common sense. It's not a hard equation to figure out, you know, and once you start thinking that maybe we need to start putting some of this biblical love in, that love bears all things, it believes all things, it hopes all things, and endures all things, and start really thinking about what 1 Corinthians says that we should be doing at the root of stuff, then we can get some stuff taken care of. But I think part of the reason why they are that they are because they ain't walking the walk. They just go to church and show up, if they even paying their tithes, doing what they can do just to say this. But to me, being a Christian or being a person of faith, whatever your faith is, to me, it's a verb. You know, it's something that's supposed to have some action behind it. And I think part of the problem is folks are not biblically rooted. That's my take on
it. Excuse me. So I have become an abolitionist as a result of this awakening that I had through my experience of incarceration. And part of that is that I'm a harm reductionist first and foremost. And for me, that is rooted in my faith as well, right? And so I think that, but beyond that, I think that we get this thing, well, it's not wrong, but we're doing it the way that we're doing it now, in a way that doesn't produce the results that we're looking for, because we have this voracious thirst for retribution. And we cannot, it can never be satisfied. So we want to have we want to attach a scarlet letter to people. We want to do all of these things because it's just, we can never be satisfied. There is not enough punishment for someone who has so-called broken the contract with society. It's just not enough to satisfy them. And the reason why I believe that, and this, I am definitely not a person that's into psychology or anything like that, but this is just me kind of analyzing this thing, is because the system has sold healing as a part of the outcome. So people think that through the punishment of the person who has caused harm, I'm going to feel better. But that can never happen. My feeling better and my healing is not tied to someone else's punishment. It never is. And so when I fail to heal or feel better about the hurt that I'm feeling, I don't want that punishment to end because I'm not feeling better, right? And the system has connected the two. So I think that psychologically we're like, well, I don't want them to have a better life. I don't want them to be able to live the rest of their life better because I'm still struggling with this pain. Because the system has told them this is justice for you. And so people in their minds think, okay, well, justice should make me feel better. But then I don't. So what's going on here? So for me, which is why I'm an abolitionist, because someone else's punishment will never, ever cause healing in another. It just won't. And we have got to own that truth. And we have to say, okay, so how do we heal people while holding people accountable and prevent future harms? Because the current system, they call it deterrence. But if it really deterred people, we wouldn't be having these conversations about crime rates, right? Like it's not the fruit. Like they said, you should know them by their fruit. Like we don't have any fruit to indicate that this system is doing what they claim it was doing. And that gets me back to why I think the system is operating as intended, because it was never intended to do those things. It was always intended to brutalize the other body, whether that's the poor body, the Black body, the indigenous body, whatever body that is, it was intended to brutalize that body. And so when you think of it in that context, you're like, it's working as intended. But we just can't get the outcomes that they keep selling us because the system was never created to do that. It'll never prevent things the way that it claims it does, because you cannot get healing out of punishment. Like it's just antithetical. But that's the myth that they keep selling us. And that's why we keep getting the same results. And that's why we really live in insanity with the current system that we have right now. So we need to do narrative change work, and we have to really start calling out the untruths that have been perpetuating for more than my lifetime, and really start to say, well, if what you're saying is true, then why are we still experiencing these things? And really just start naming stuff, right? Like, like Waleisah was saying, like, if you believe the Middle Eastern Jesus, not the one that the white Jesus that be on the pictures and everything, but if you believe the Middle Eastern Jesus that's in the Bible and what he practiced, then how are you not practicing forgiveness? Right? Like, how are you not walking in those truths? And so, it's a bunch of just mess. And that's what continues to have me to do the work, is because I'm determined to call it out and to, again, make it so that we are preventing harm in the first place and not just trying to punish people to healing, which will never happen.
Absolutely. I think you both spoke on, some different concepts around looking at justice from a different perspective, right? Like, and so being more preventative in things, right? So if you have a person that's in need, instead of, waiting till they get arrested because they went to get diapers, right? How are you getting them set up to make sure they have the resources and the supports they need, as well as people, in communities that we know are typically targets for, just policing and things like that. Like, how are we engaging to make sure that people have the resources and the support so that we're preventing people from going into the system in the first place? I've really been focusing a lot and kind of redirecting a lot of my energy around restorative justice and healing work. And it's really been because of the work I was doing in like policy spaces and advocacy spaces. And I was just seeing how like the trauma, right, like was still like connected to the people, right? So even though a person may be out, they may be home, they may be doing some really amazing work in the field and fighting for justice, there's still this like secondhand trauma that they experience themselves, like that they're living with. And oftentimes it's then harmful even in the working environment as a result. So I appreciate you both just kind of sharing your thoughts and insight about that. Because I just think that a lot of harm is done, across the board, right? And oftentimes, even when we are working to advocate for change, potential allies and other folks, if there are not people who are impacted by these systems that are having a voice in these spaces, can also do harm, even in those type of spaces, right? In addition to the harm that's being done within the system. And, I want to share, like, I was on a panel, this was a few years ago, and it was talking about, at the time, it was looking at HBCUs and how they can engage, formerly incarcerated scholars and be more in tune with what's going on. And one of the things that I lifted up was not just the HBCUs, but the Black-led organizations as a whole, right? I think that we all, as mentioned in introductions, are affiliated with different organizations. And I think that there's like this breakdown somehow, right? Like, I think with HBCUs, with Black-led organizations, in this particular fight, I've been trying to figure out what it is, right? Because they have these Hill days, right? They meet with legislators, they take pictures with the politicians, right? They do all the things, but yet I don't know where the work, like where's the change happening, right? Like they have these huge base, like all of the orgs, right? No matter which one, they all have these humongous base, and nothing seems to be moving. And so I would love to get your thoughts about that. Like, what when you all think about like the organizations you all are affiliated with, or even just organizations within your city, what do you see them doing as it relates to really addressing these issues? And then two, like what can they do if they just, if they are having these Hill days and things like that? I call them photo ops, but
You took it right out my mouth. I ain't ashamed to say it. So I'll wait to get to my part.
No, go ahead.
That's what I was gonna say. You saying what it's gonna take for them to focus on being really about community as opposed to step shows and being seen. Whether you're going to your annual boules or your annual sorority meetings or fraternity meetings, that doesn't mean anything if you ain't doing anything. I mean, we Black for one, so I'm sure that out of the 400 and 500 people that are going to these annual conferences or these centennial conference, I'm sure at least a third of the people in the room have somebody who's been incarcerated. And so I don't understand why so much of the focus is on prancing around and wearing your para and doing this and doing that. We do community service. We go here, or we may go to nursing homes, or we sit with it. Where's the work being done when it comes to the criminal justice space? That is what's impacting you. And yes, you may show a movie here and now and then, but what are you doing after the movie? Just because you saw a good movie? I mean, I saw 12 Years a Slave. I cried and I went on to the next thing. So what is that going to do? So are you just watching it to say, now that's so sad, now what are we going to do about it? Yeah, you're doing it, you showing it, but what is, if you're doing something, what even what the Bible said, what fakes without works or something not dead? I mean, so you're just doing something to be doing it. It's like people say you just busy to be keeping busy. That's all you're doing. You're just busy to keep busy. If you're not doing anything, if your work is not having any tangible results. And we have too many folks in the D9 between all of these sororities and fraternities, even some new ones that's coming up, for this not to be an issue. Same thing with Black preachers. There's no reason why criminal justice reform is still hitting our communities harder than it hits the white communities. With as many Black preachers that we have, almost on every corner, and almost everybody being in all these sororities, if all these folks will get together and say, we're not going to put up with it, and find some strategy with doing it. I mean, and of course, with me, I always like to start with the dollar. I mean, it's expensive being in a sorority and a fraternity. And if you leverage that same amount of money that we're always spending on traveling to these centennials and these conferences and doing that, and use that same leveraging power and get everybody together and say, what we're going to do this year for our annual community service, what we're going to do is we're going to have a 1-week blackout where we're not going to spend any money with anybody that's not a Black owned business, because we want to see what the financial impact is in our communities. We're not going to go into, what we're going to do is or identify one store that's in your neighborhood, particularly one that, I'm from Columbus, Georgia, and there's one that sits directly in the hood. And I have never seen, in the 8, 9, 10 years that I was there, I've never seen a white person come into that store to buy anything. These folks from Middle Eastern come and get these wig shops, sit up in the hood, talk about you from the time you get in there, but you still sit your product on their counter and give them your money. And so the question I get when I tell people and talk about it is, where can we go about it? Well, where else can we go to get our nails done or whatever? Okay, go get your nail thing, or find somebody and encourage more Black women to become nail tech. It's not like it can't be done. And so I think with the power and the leverage, just like Black preachers had the leverage when it comes to presidential, that's why they always call on Black preachers, because they have the influence. And it's the same thing with sororities and fraternities. There are millions of us. And if we use the leverage the right way to say, this is particularly when it's coming to women, what is the fastest growing prison population, we could use that leverage. I mean, and it's not about clicks either. Oh, she's not active. Who cares if they active? I don't care whether I'm active or not, and I'm not currently active, because my sorority ain't doing nothing. You're not doing anything that's being particular to me. I don't care nothing about dogs in animal shelters on death row. We got human beings in death row, on death row. I don't want to hit, if it's not anything that's hitting with me. So I don't see a need for me to pay my money and be active. To do what? Because I'm gonna buy my pair if I want it, because I'm the one that crossed them sands, and I'm the one that had to get out there and sweat to get them letters. So part of the problem is we still have cliques. Oh, you active, you not active. Oh, you undergrad, you grad. And we do the same thing in the criminal justice space, where we are talking about, oh, you fed time, you state time. Oh, I ain't got no sex charge. Oh, I just had a white collar charge. It doesn't matter. We're all just as impacted. Your felony, as far as I know, is wear the same scarlet F that my felony did. And you was out of job, homeless, just like I was out of a job, homeless. So we need to get out of that, and pull together and say, we need all of our folks together. The folks who ain't even active, we need y'all to get to writing them and let them know this is what we plan on doing for 2024. So we can make an impact not only in our local election and state election, but in the presidential elections. To when we have these debates, that's what we need to be doing, having these debates, honest debates, and say, we have 160,000 members in this city alone, or we have 180,000 members in this state alone. We intend to activate every last one of our members in this state. If you do not address the issues that are impacting our families, mass incarceration, poverty, lack of jobs, lack of access to mental health care, our children being targeted in school with these so-called zero tolerance policies that's sending them to the school to prison pipeline quicker. If you want our support and you want our vote, we expect you to support the things that support our community. You know how much power and leverage that is? If we could just get together and do it right, it can be done. But we too much busy about twirling canes and dancing and trying to step, because it's not important until you get locked up, or until it's your son now somewhere that's locked up. So that's definitely what I think it is. I'm tired of the Tide and Pony show, of doing the same thing. It's time to get serious and and I kind of it makes me mad that when I see issues come up with women step up, women get out here and they break it down. There's something about LGBTQ issues, the LGBT community get together and they get it done. If there's something impacting disabled community, they get together and get it done. And it bothers me that when something needs to be done in the Black community, we just can't seem to get out together, because we can't get over whatever our internalized issues are. But I know that was long, but that was my thing. I get tired of the doing stuff for show.
So I'll jump in, and I'm going to say this and name it and own my own mess, because I think that many of us, and I was included in that group, lived by the standards of whiteness, and we judged ourselves and judged others based on the standards of whiteness. And I think that when we do that, we end up going into the mindset of systemic racism that propels the criminal legal system, right? Like, so then we like, oh, well, we don't want that to be our issue because we're not like them, right? Like, so because we're judging ourselves based on the standard of whiteness. And so from that white standard, I've never been to prison. I've never encountered that. So I'm living through to those standards. And because you have, and because you that you are less than me, I can otherize you, right? Like, because we're using that whiteness as the criteria, those standards of whiteness as the criteria upon which we're judging one another. And so I think that because a lot of us have, and I was one of them, grew up thinking that I could be successful under those standards, right? Like that I could meet the standards of whiteness, until I realized I could never meet them because of my Black skin, right? But I had still been, sold the okie doke, right? Like, that you can do that. And so I think that unfortunately, some of people in power and some of and the organizations have bought into that they are judging their members based on the standards of whiteness. And I don't think that they are doing it consciously. I think they're doing it subconsciously, like I was. And so we have this reputation that we're trying to keep, again, rooted in the standards of whiteness. And that when one of our members or people in our community fail to live up to those standards, then we do what the community does. We do what the white people do, what the white people have told us to do, which is we otherize and exile them, right? And we don't work on their behalf, and we don't interrogate, wait a minute. Should we even be doing that in the first place? Because, you know, I can tell you that you can quickly go from one side of the standards of whiteness to the other side of the standards of whiteness in a heartbeat. Let's piss off the right white people, and I promise you'll be feeling the wrath. And so I think that, so for me, I feel like that's part of the problem, is that we have internalized the standards of whiteness so much so that we don't even know that we're judging one another based on those standards. And then I think like the other part of it, and so it's an embarrassment, right? Because again, those standards tell us to stigmatize and otherize the people, right? So because that's how I empower myself, I feel better, right? Like that's, you know, Dr. Martin Luther King said that, like, if the strategy was to separate and divide poor white folk from poor Black folk, right? And if you made the poor white folk feel a little bit better than the poor Black folk, then you can keep them separated, because if they join forces, they're gonna undo they're gonna shift the power dynamics, right? Because it was more of them than those that were people in power. And I think that that is why we have been convinced to adopt the standards and live by the standards of whiteness, because then the power dynamics remain the same. And we'll still live under the thumb of oppression in as a group in total, even though some of us seem to experience freedom, but only on the terms of whiteness.
Thank you both for lifting that up. That was both of the things you shared were very powerful. When you all think about just the stigma of women specifically, right? So we're focusing on women, of course, and people who are living with convictions, whether they went to prison, jail, they, you know, got probation terms, but still living with that felony. What would you want people to know about women that have been impacted by the system, and just what is happening right now, especially with Black women who are system impacted?
I'll jump in.
Yeah, I'm gonna
Sis.
follow you, Avalon.
I just feel like the stories that we need to tell are our stories. Like before we were anything that the system labeled us, we were mothers, daughters, aunties, cousins, right? Even play cousins, right? Like, you know, that's how we get down. So those are our identities, and we should not and don't lose those identities as a result of any encounter with this racist system, right, and misogynistic system. So that we have to start to begin to say, you know, there are people living next door to you who have been entangled with the criminal legal system, and that we have to get away from the Hollywood concepts of people with felony convictions, right? We got to get away from the propaganda that has indoctrinated us to believe certain things about people who have been entangled with the criminal legal system. And we have to say that, okay, ask yourself, in the 80s and 90s, we was locking up Black men. Starting in 2000, we started locking up Black women. So we went from Black men to Black women. Like, what's behind that? Like, you can't, drug use is the same. All of the things that cause people to end up at the courtroom stairs is equal. But why is it that we are burning through Black communities, first the Black men and now the Black women, and don't allow the system to just be like, well, that's just kind of how it is, right? Because there's more to it, and we just can no longer accept that, and we have to pay the stories of like the women on this screen. And more importantly, we have to demand that they talk about us the way that we want them to talk about us. Like, we have to go walk into rooms and be like, no, you're not gonna call me a felon. No, you're not gonna call me a former inmate. No, you're not gonna call me a convict. You're just not gonna do that. Like, we have to start demanding that they use the language, the proper language, to talk about us and to us. And I think that that's part of what we need to do as well. So humanize us by being in those rooms, but also demanding that they treat us with respect and use appropriate language when it comes to talking about us and to us.
Anything you'd like to add, Waleisah?
No, perfectly stated. And you hardly ever find me being without words, but perfectly stated. And I love Avalon's spirit, because I tend to, when I see Avalon, I say, you know what, she pisses a lot of people off. And I tend to piss a lot of people off, but I don't mind, because I think when you start pissing people off, that means somebody's noticing the great work that you're doing. So I get that same, she perfectly said it. So yeah.
Awesome.
So noted on this day that Avalon made me speechless.
We're noting that. We are noting that. So when we focus specifically on like women-led organizations, right? So women's clubs, sororities, different organizations, tons and tons of women-led organizations out there, right? How do we work with them to shift this narrative and to get them engaged in this advocacy space? What do you all think are some ways that, you know, if there are people who are leading organizations or groups now that are listening, may be able to do to tap into shifting that narrative or the advocacy outside of some of the things you all have already listed up?
I mean, just do it. I mean, you see a need, do it. So I don't know, and I think too, part of it is owning what it is. You know, I go around a lot of folks. I know for a fact they was locked up. Some of them was locked up with me, and just in their conversation, don't want to mention the fact that they're just as impacted. So it starts with you being able to own whether you're just as impacted. Whether you're, say, you know, like me, I grew up in foster care. I'm a victim of molestation and rape. I'm a victim of domestic violence. I'm a survivor of domestic violence. You got to be able to say what it is that has happened to you, but you have come out of, because you never know who you can be a testimony to. And so I would just say, for these organizations that are doing work, maybe even in their own areas and not in the type of areas that we're doing, to look at it how the intersectionality works. Because yeah, you may, and I get it all the time, oh, we don't work with adults, we only work with youth. Okay, well, your youth gonna be grown people one day, and then they're gonna have to come to me. We don't work with you. But you saying that you don't work, oh no, we don't work with adults, we only work with you. That's okay, because when they get in the system, they're going in at 15 and coming out at 55. So at some point, there's intersectionality. Oh, well, we don't work with folks on the sex offender registry. Oh, okay, but then you forget when that 17-year-old who's been dating a 15-year-old for 2 years until the mama found out that her boyfriend was Black, and then she said that it was statutory rape. Now you want somebody to come and advocate for your child who's on a sex offender registry. You know, all these things resonate. So it's like, oh, we don't work with folks in recovery. Yeah, you do. Because if you work with people who are just as impacted, you work with somebody who's been in recovery who done stole something they ain't had no business stealing because they was in active addiction. Or you work with somebody who was homeless. You all ever see somebody who's unsheltered who ain't been in jail? Or somebody who's been in active addiction who hasn't been in jail? So at some point, it's all going to come back, particularly if you're Black, if you're young, if you're broke, if you're unsheltered, you know, unemployed. At some point, it's going to come back to this anyway. And if we don't be careful, the Black population, you're going to have more Black folks in prison than out on the outside. because that same mentality of, well, that wasn't my issue, or that doesn't affect us, gonna come back. So just step out and say, you know what, this needs to be done. It needs to be done, and we need to get more involved. And I know one of the things I'm so tired of is seeing Black women at the forefront, Black justice impacted women. I'm tired of going, and even though I know it needs to be done, I'm tired of sitting in the room talking about stopping these gang laws or working with men who need to return home from prison. And I'm looking around like, what are men at? They need to be up in here. But it just goes to show that the power that women have and the tenacity that we have, that we are always standing in the gap for other folks, even other races. We are the most forgiving race of other folks. So I know I kind of got off topic, but just do it. Like Nike said it, you see a need, do it. You see trash on the ground, you pick it up. You don't walk over it. And it's the same thing when it comes to doing this criminal justice reform. Yeah, you might only work with folks with disabilities, but if you see somebody clearly being discriminated in the line who was in line before you, and the cashier serves you first when you know you're white, and they've been standing over there 10 minutes, you step in and you say something. And not only do you say something, you call them on their crap, that what you did was wrong. And because of that, I'm not going to come back and patron your business. And I want to make sure that you know why I'm not going to be patroning your business. That's how you do that. So, but yeah, I get on tangent because I be so passionate about it. And I see some of this stuff go on. So, and I call people on their stuff. And I just think folks don't like that. I think folks respect me, but they definitely don't like me all the time. But I don't really care, because it needs to be said. And I think it takes a strong person to be able to say, I know what I've done wrong, but I've done my part. Let's talk about what you did wrong that you just didn't get caught doing. So yeah, I think we need to just get out of that mentality that it doesn't affect me. That's not my issue, and just step in and say this is all our issues.
So I want to just echo what my sister just said and I'm just going to rephrase it using the words of Brian Stevenson, get proximate, right? Like get close to the problem, get close to the people, and learn. Sometimes it's just you just being there learning and then pitching in, right? Because sometimes you need to learn how to help because you're not coming in swooping in with no saving mentality thinking that you can help, right? Like, so sometimes it's, but get proximate. And the other thing that I want to do is we have a very unique opportunity, especially as women. So this message is for white women and for Black women who consciously or unconsciously judge themselves on the standards of whiteness. They coming for your womb, and they gonna put people in bunks based on that. So if you think that because you're not one of them, I didn't steal, I didn't do drugs, which you probably did, but I didn't do whatever it is that you have attached to the women who have been incarcerated, the way that they're coming for our wombs can land you in a prison bunk. And all you did was have a miscarriage. So don't get it twisted that they're not coming for your body in that way, and that the system that needs to be fed bodies in those bunks won't do everything it can to put yours in that bunk. So like we have to take advantage of, and we have to begin to really open the eyes of women who just have not accepted the fact that this system is now out to get us. It was out to get Black men, then became Black women, and now it's going to be white. So it is coming for you. And that if you do not learn what we know and work with us, you will then become a number like we were. And so now is the time. Like we can't sleep on this. Now is the time for us to be united, because they building new prisons, y'all. Who you think they trying to put in those prisons? Like they keep churning through populations, and now the population is the womb, those who have wombs. So like this is an opportunity for us identifying the intersectionality and like, wait a minute, this is how this system operates. Now my eyes have been opened, and I need to work with those who have already gone through it because they're the experts to figure out how we keep the rest, to keep other people from going in it, and to, in my opinion, dismantle it and create other systems of accountability, restoration, and things like that, things like that. So like now is the time for us to really wake up, like, because they not playing. They just not playing. And if we sit back on our laurels and think, oh, it'll never happen to me. That was me. I never thought. I did everything the way that society said I was supposed to do it. I would have never imagined myself on a bunk. And yet there I was on the bunk with strange women keeping me alive. So, which I owe them everything. And I will always uplift the unconditional love that they showed me every time I talk about them. So that's the other part too, is that we need to grasp and seize this moment where the womb is under attack and be like, sis, let me pull you up real quick and talk to you about this, because this system will put you on a bunk, and it's the trajectory is for y'all to be the next ones to fill up these bunks.
Wow. I think that's really deep, especially if people are not following what's happening throughout the country right now with some of these laws, they need to be for sure. So as we start wrapping up, I want to just give you each just two things. One, an opportunity to close out, and then also share how people can contact you if they may have questions or interested in the work that you're doing or being able to support you in your work. So I will pass it to Waleisah first, and then Avalon.
Well, I'm here in Georgia. I am on Twitter, IG, and TikTok. I'm on TikTok now. And I am Waleisah, Waleisah. And I can be found on Facebook, Waleisah Wilson. And that'll probably be the easiest way. But for those who are not on social media, I can be reached. I'm trying to figure out which would be the better, the shortest. At the website, at the nonprofit New Life Second Chance Outreach, which is the website is www.nlscoinc.org, or the All of Us Are None Georgia chapter, as we're currently working on ending slavery here in Georgia to join those other states. So we would love to have folks connect with us and support us in those efforts as well. And you can just go to All of Us Are None Georgia spelled out .org.
Yeah,
Thank
so the best way to
you.
reach, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
So you can reach me on our website, which is ilarj.org. So it's www.ilarj.org. Our social media handles are IL_ARJ on Twitter and Instagram. We are also we are not on Facebook, but we are, if you just look up the Illinois Alliance for Reentry and Justice on LinkedIn, you can find us there. But that's the way to reach us and learn more about our work and things like that. Thank you.
Awesome. I just want to thank you both for your voices, your sisterhood, just the passion and the work that you all are doing to change these systems, to abolish the things that we are seeing, not only showing up, as you all mentioned, with one group, but really starting to evolve to impact other groups as well, and really to have an oppressive state of existence within this country, unfortunately. So I'm hoping that the people who are viewing this will really take heed to the things we talked about, that our organizations and our groups that we are connected with will really think about their missions and visions, and how the criminal legal system is really playing out right now within the Black community and just the communities as a whole, as well as communities that are impoverished, and how different populations are being targeted for a variety of different things. We heard about people that are unsheltered. We heard about, people who have substance uses, people who have wounds. Like, I mean, it's just an ongoing fight. And so I just appreciate both of you and just all the work that you do, and taking the time to get with me this evening to have this conversation. There will be their information that was shared. The websites will be listed on our YouTube channel. So if people want to connect that way, you'll be able to find it. But thank you both again for joining me this evening, and just look forward to our continued work together in this fight.
Thanks for having me, Dr. Z.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zari, for having me. I appreciate it.